Let me give you these poems. Here's coming. So, sure. Okay, you can start again. So, okay, we've been talking about songs in the 19th century. The first one was a classical version of Earl King. The second one was a romantic version of Earl King, Friedrich Reichert and Franz Schubert. Two details I forgot to mention. One for each of these songs. Even Reichert, the classical composer, realized that there's something spooky about this form, and wanted to do something when the Earl King sings or speaks to make it a little bit different. So even he had an instinct that I have to change something. So what he did, instead of, he keeps the same form. He's a classical composer. So he keeps the same form. Right? We've heard that before. But what he does, instead of having the Earl King sing the real melody, my voice is bad today, sorry. He has the Earl King sing in a monotone. In other words, he does the same thing inside the classical form. It stays sort of classical because the form is still there, right? The shape is still there. We still even hear the melody. But the singer, who is singing the Earl King line, is singing a monotone. Where have we heard that before? Somebody can scream it out. That something that's spooky. Don Giovanni, yeah, the ghost sings a monotone, remember? And then he sings that thing at the end. But and again, he sings it one note higher each time. So that classical version has something really interesting about it. The other thing you can listen for at the end of Schubert, the entire... so this is a classical way of accounting for something. The romantic way of accounting something for Schubert, which is the death of the child, if you'll remember, listen to that ending again. And notice that the piano actually ends before the poem ends. Right? And it just kind of trails off, and the singer sings without the piano, a free form. It's actually a recitative. In fact, he writes recitative in the text. Recitative is a form that comes from opera and from oratorios, in which a singer kind of sings a sort of half singing and half speaking, like, in the unlikely event of sudden cabin depressurization, oxygen masks will fall from the ceilings. Please put them on your child before you, something like that. In other words, you want to get information across in an opera, you use recitative. So Franz Schubert uses a recitative at the end to say, in his arms the child was dead, which means that he totally breaks form. Not only does he break form in all the ways we've talked about before, but he breaks form completely by letting the singer sing in this free, totally free form, without piano, without melody, without any structure really behind him at all. Two little details that are really important and I forgot to mention. Okay, so from there, I want to show you, oh, Paganini must be in the next room. So you have to listen at home. You have to listen to those two dramatic scenes. One of Liszt and Chopin at a party, basically a soirée, salon, where a lot of this music was performed, and the other one is Paganini, who performs on stage the great virtuosi of the 19th century, and you'll recognize them from things like the Beatles in the early days, Shea Stadium, that sort of thing. Virtuosos became the hit of the age. Put that aside. We're going on now to the late 19th century, and the question is, where did songs go from here? We have the classical song, we have the early romantic songs by Schubert. I want to show you a late romantic song by Mahler, Gustav Mahler. The poet is Friedrich Rückert. It's called I Have Become Lost to the World. That's a translation. I'm just going to read it. You have it on your content for week 7. I would just, print it out and have it next to you while you listen to the music, so that you don't merely listen to the sound of the music, but you also know what's going on. The first question we're going to ask is a typical one that we always ask is how is this poem romantic? Or is it, I guess, is the question. And I'll just read it in English. I have become lost to the world with which I have wasted so much time. For so long, it, the world, heard nothing from me. It must believe I died. I have to say, this is I'm trying to do a close translation of this, so it's not going to sound like good poetry. It's not in English. It's excellent poetry in German. Maybe for that reason I'll just read a line of it for you later on. So once again, for so long the world heard nothing from me. It must have believed I died. It doesn't matter to me if it thinks of me as dead. I really can't protest, for really I have died to the world. I have died from the world's turmoil and rest in a quiet realm. I live alone in my heaven, in my loving, and in my song. Okay, I wonder if I could ask you guys, is there anything that reminds you of the things that we talked about, the definition of romantic? We've talked about the poetry, we've talked about the music, and we've talked about the painting.
It's like this guy's given up on the real world.
Yeah.
He's going to the next.
Well, yeah, you put it in a nutshell, it's perfect, yeah. I mean, the death to the world, right, the physical world means nothing to me, there's nothing in it for me, and it's fine with me, because I've gone on to another realm, right? And how does he define that realm? We're clearly, we must be talking about the spiritual realm, but yeah, so it's
Quiet.
Sorry?
Quiet.
Quiet, yeah, it's silent, because it's beyond the sounds of the world.
Defines it as my heaven.
My heaven, and then we have, that's clearly, talking romantic terminology, as a spirituality, right? And then one more term. That defines his realm.
Smoking? Like song?
Song, yeah. Which is strange, right? But when you think about what the Romanticists were saying, it's not so strange. The world is dead to me, and they were all saying this, as was Caspar David Friedrich, right? The only way to find another realm, though, is through the imagination. And the way the imagination funnels your awareness to another realm is through art, through song, right? Or through painting if you're Caspar David Friedrich, or through poetry if you're Friedrich Rückert, right? Rückert wrote the poem in meinem Lied, and he talks about language as Lied, which means song, and so he's even taken the spoken word and imagining that it's being sung, so he's taking it up a notch from where it really is, right? It takes Gustav Mahler to say, okay, I'm going to create from this poem a song, but look what happens to the song that we used to know as a classical song as just something like Let It Be. Right? It really is a classical song. Pretty much every popular song that you hear is classical in one way or another. If you think of hip-hop even, hip-hop you could say is the classical song. I mean, it's pretty much structured, it's pretty much symmetrical for the most part. It's pretty much, even though they don't usually sing melodies, that's true, but maybe it's like the Earl King in the Reichert version. Be that as it may, I'm going to play a moment from this song, and there are a couple things you'll notice that the song form has come a long, long way since its beginning, only 70, 80 years earlier. This is Gustav Mahler, Ich bin der Welt abhanden gekommen, I've been lost to the world. listen to the whole thing. I'll point out a couple other things, but you can listen to the whole thing on your own. I think this is one of the most beautiful pieces written in the 19th century. And for a couple of reasons, and I'll show you what I think are a couple of those reasons. But just first of all, what do you notice? I mean, some obvious things that are different from any song that we've heard before.
It's not loud, it's just soft, quiet, kind
Yeah.
of peaceful.
Yeah, very, very slow, right? And almost as if the melody doesn't form as a melody, it just kind of floats, right? Yeah.
Would you say it's kind of carrying out notes more compared to the other ones?
Yeah, very much, yeah, carrying out notes, very long notes, right? So that you don't, I mean, there's one point at the very beginning where there's a note that hangs in midair and you think it's going to go on and it then doesn't, right? It just hangs there for a while, and then of course it does eventually. But yeah, it's very good. Yeah, so the sense that the motion is sort of drawn out, it's almost as if it's in a stop motion. Anything else? What about the background, the accompaniment? Something as radical has changed from the songs we're used to. So, this thing over here,
Piano?
it's gone. What is it? What's the accompaniment? You catch it? It's a full orchestra. And there's a 60-piece orchestra sitting behind them or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what the score says. And it's beautifully scored. That first instrument you hear is called an English horn. I just happen to play it as well, because it's basically a big oboe. But it's a beauty. And now listen to what the melody does. And I'm just going to show you, it's just in the accompaniment before the voice comes in. And you'll recognize something romantic about it maybe. It's going to become the melody. When the voice, let me start with the voice, actually. When the voice comes in, it goes like this. Oops, I missed that one. Okay, so that's basic. I mean, it's not a catchy melody, but it floats, right, as you were saying. Now listen to what that English horn does at the very beginning. You hear at the very beginning, you hear what a strange way to start, right? It's gorgeous. Well, what has he done with that melody? Let me hear it again. The melody, again, is... So what's he doing with that melody at the very beginning? And then off we go, right? You get it? Can you put it in words? You can hear it, right? He starts it, stops it, starts over, stops it, starts over again, faster than the voice is going to come in later on. And then, even to be more subtle, you're going to hear it all kinds of other places, like in the cellos and basses later on, and you'll notice it. And then when the voice comes in, the orchestra started out like this. Oh, wait a minute, let's see, where are we here? Yeah, that's what it is. The orchestra is going like this. That's the voice. In other words, the orchestra starts 2 beats before the voice, and you feel it's like the voice comes in and it's like an echo of the melody that's already been there. Not only has it been there, but it's been there 7 times, I think it is, if I counted right. Right? In various forms, and not complete until really the melody, the voice comes in. It's like these little fragments floating around you. And it's kind of like, if you want to think of it this way, it's kind of a crass comparison in a way, because Beethoven is really energetic and rhythmic and powerful and forward driving, and this is the opposite, and it kind of destroys the mood, I just noticed. So, but that's romantic, right? First of all, it's romantic because the form isn't contained. It's like you've got this melody, and then he starts it, stops it, starts it, and draws on a little farther, stops it, draws on a little farther still, and then echoes it in the bass, echoes it in the treble, and then the voice comes in after somebody else had just started the melody. Right? Very strange, but gorgeous. Listen to it again, and I think we can do that. Well, no, let me let you do that on your own. There's no reason to do that really here. So, then I want to show you the ending. I live alone in my heaven, in my loving and my song. Because the ending is, again, like we talked about and you mentioned before, the ending of Schubert kind of hangs in midair and it feels like it doesn't end. Mahler does the same thing with this, and it's just stunning. Let's see if I can find a good place to jump in. No, that's the end. That's the very end. Let's see. All right, that's the climax. Nope, a little bit farther still. See, man, just do the last stanza. I think this is it. Oh, in my heaven, last two lines. My loving. First two notes of the song at the end. And then a strange chord. It's the English horn from the very beginning. There's that note that hangs, that doesn't want to go where you want it. And the English horn just stops, and the strings go on. Isn't that gorgeous? I mean, it says, oops, we're starting over again. Notice that, this is the beginning now, that those were the last two notes. Body, were the first two notes backwards. Right? And so he ends it like he begins it, but it feels unended. It feels like it's hanging in midair, and that's exactly what it does, really. From the text to the style to the thing. Just lovely stuff. Gustav Mahler, turn of the 20th century. He came to the United States for a little while, directed the New York Philharmonic, went back to Vienna, I believe, before he died. And one of the great late Romantic composers. Let's stop it for just a second. That's a good